Now we invite our first panel, the Healthy Agriculture panel, to the stage. The moderator is Mr. Eddy Oketch, who's the British Council Global Changemaker and founder and president, Peace for Africa and Development Initiative.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we convene here in a very important occasion to discuss matters of food security globally. I come from Kenya, and I'm a 21-year-old and a rising sophomore student here in the USA. I grew in a village whereby food security in terms of accessibility and sustainable access to food is not a problem in a paper or a problem in the thoughts of minds of leaders, but a reality where people go without food access. When I was leaving Kenya to come to study in the USA, I thought that actually that problem would not exist. However, from the city where I study here in the USA, I realized that the problem exists. But more visibly, the problem exists in terms of access to quality food. And whenever we talk as drivers of change in this world on food security matters, sometimes we are blurred by the idea of access to food, and we forget the idea of nutrition, which is why this panel is particularly very important. How do we incorporate nutrition into the agenda of food security? And that is why this panel today is going to help us explore this particular agenda. And therefore, we are going to look at how do we bolster healthy agriculture. And in this particular panel, ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by wonderful and accomplished leaders from all sectors of different engagements. And just to take time to introduce my panel today, we are joined from my far right with Honourable Minister Beverley Oda, who is the Minister of International Cooperation in Canada, who has also served as the Member of Parliament since 2004 in Canada. Minister Oda served as a Minister of Canadian Heritage and Status of Women, a Senior Vice President of Industrial Affairs at CTV, and a chair of the Lakeridge Health Hospital Network. Apart from this, she also has great leadership experience, and she has been a recipient of the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal. On the second part is Honourable Ertharin Cousin, who is the 12th Executive Director of United Nations World Food Program. Ms. Cousin brings great experience to this particular panel after more than 25 years national leadership experience as well as international leadership exposure on the areas of nonprofit governance and corporate involvement. She especially has committed a focus on hunger, food, and resilience strategies to help guide the World Food Program in meeting urgent needs while championing long solutions to food insecurity in the globe. Then lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we are also joined by Mr. Tom Arnold, who is the Chief Executive of Concern Worldwide. And this is a global leadership which he took since 2001. Prior to this, Mr. Arnold served as the Assistant Secretary General and Chief Economist in the Department of Agriculture and Food in Ireland. He has also worked extensively for the European Commission for over 10 years, and 3 of these years he spent working on the food security case in Africa. He has also served as the chairman of the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development Committee for Agriculture. And this is why we believe that this particular panel is going to help us explore this wonderful thought on incorporating nutrition on food security. And without further ado, I would like to join my panel, and very quickly, I will start from Honourable Beverley. Given your involvement with the Canadian International Development Agency, may you help us understand what is the case around investment in nutrition?
Well, thank you very much, and I'm pleased to be here this morning because it's a very important issue. Why is it important? Because it is about people and nations. It's important because we want people, individuals, to maximize the potential inherent as human beings, both physically and mentally. And we all know the impacts of undernutrition. It's important because for every society and every nation, we want that society to be healthy, educated, and strong. We want everyone to be able to reach their potential. It also is important because food security is important. Without food, we suffer. And the consequences of lack of food are incidents, situations, create consequences that we've been trying to struggle with. So I think now is the time to really surge up and to target and focus, not just on food, not just on the quantity, not just on calories, but on the nutritious value of food. We are under-investing if we don't include food in our work on food security. It's also because, as I guess World Food Program has indicated, we cannot prevent drought. We can prevent famine. And if we have good programs for prevention and resilience, again, we're back to people. Let's build up the physical resilience of people, and we can see the differences in countries that have strong programs. Also, to move on, it's about your economy. It's about strengthening the country and the economy of the country. You want a strong workforce, a physically strong workforce, but you also want the workforce that has the knowledge and skills that will be required to grow economies. It's a good investment because for every dollar you invest in nutrition, the payoff is $138 in better health and better productivity. It's about fiscal management because the consequences of not dealing with nutrition and good food are that the consequential costs on your healthcare systems, your drug needs, all of those consequential impacts that we have to deal with because we haven't invested in nutrition in the critical first 1,000 days, and that period is the most critical. And I would say also it's about stability and security. We all know that there's a forecast looming of youth population demographics growing. If we don't enable this population and this segment of society to maximize its potential and be skillful, have the skills they needed, and achieve gainful, productive employment, it will then lead to a consequence of instability within countries. And so for those, I think, 6, 7 reasons, I believe that investing in food security, particularly in nutrition, is critically important. And it has to be invested with country plans. Nutrition within country plans should be integrated. It's not just food security, it's not just health. It's your agriculture programs, it's your economic programs, it's your industrial and employment programs. I think it's also about how do we increase private sector engagement because that will grow your economy. It's about processing of food, the distribution of food, and the value added of food. And the most, I believe, critical piece of your investment is to include women. To include women and make sure they're part of your investment. Investing in women, investing also in research and new technologies. We've got to find cost-effective, innovative approaches to address food security and the needed nutritional values in diets. When we do all of these, it's incumbent on us together with countries, with peoples, with civil society, et cetera, to be accountable for the work. In order to make sure that we're going to achieve the outcomes we want accountability and tracking. It's the only way that we're going to measure our progress, identify gaps, and also identify where the needed resources have to be placed as we move into the future. So investing in food security and nutrition, it's a smart thing to do, and it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
It is very important that you've mentioned public-private partnership. And I think that when you talk about nutrition, you know, it's a new topic that is emerging, given that the focus has been about food access and food sustainability, given the problem of hunger globally. I want to direct this, I want to further explore this to, with the Honourable Cousin. What do you think international organizations and governments, you know, and even businesses can creatively do to upscale their public-private partnership in terms of exploring this idea of nutrition?
Thank you so much, Eddy, for that question, and thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in today's events. Let me begin by saying when you say also business, it must be partnerships that are governments, UN organizations, as well as business and civil society, but also the people. We can't forget that ultimately these partnerships are for the benefit of those we serve. And so often, with whether it's a UN organization or government, we look at the relationship with business as just that, a relationship, and not a partnership. And we see it as an opportunity for additional cash. How do we meet budgets? Can we bring in the private sector to assist us by additional contributions? But the private sector, if we truly partner with them for the benefit of the people we serve, the opportunity we have is to take the knowledge from private sector, the experiences of private sector, the tools that they use to ensure that they provide shareholder value and make people value. And that's how we can begin to build the public-private partnerships that will ensure we're supporting people. But it also means that private sector needs to recognize that this is not a quarterly investment. It's not an investment that will show return in your annual report. This is a long-term engagement between the private sector and the governments and the UN organizations and civil society. We need everyone committed to this for the longer term to ensure that we build sustainable opportunities and not just good programs. And that also means to governments, though, that it requires opening up the space, the policy space, for the development of private sector. Because if there's not an opportunity for private sectors to drive shareholder value, to drive investor value, to drive to the bottom line, ultimately it will become simply corporate social responsibility. And that, while good and productive in many cases, is not the limit of the partnership and the relationship that we need from the private sector. There must be an opportunity for longer-term engagement for the private sector from a business standpoint as well, so ensuring that governments provide that space. And that's not just at the country level. It requires regional space. Because particularly when you're discussing sub-Saharan Africa, many of the in-country markets are too small alone for private sectors to invest and drive to return on that investment. It requires the opportunity for regional engagement. So opening the space for regional opportunities for private sector. So if we can all work together, recognizing that we each have our own stakeholders that we're responsible for, but ultimately we share one stakeholder, and that's the needy people, the most vulnerable populations in the countries that we serve. And if we drive to serve those people together, we can find the opportunities to make the concessions that will ensure there's benefit for all of the parties, the private sector, governments, the UN organization, to meet our goals and responsibilities, but ultimately in support of the people.
Yeah, talking about long-term solutions and short-term solutions, I think that's something very powerful, which I want to narrow it down to, you know, agricultural departments and developmental sectors in economy or even in the world as a whole. Mr. Arnold, what do you think agricultural sectors, you know, and development sectors can do? Let's say, for instance, in a span of 1,000 days window, you know, what can be done to upscale nutrition with agricultural sectors and and developmental sectors?
Well, the focus on the 1,000 days is, as Beverley said, the critical window during which there has to be adequate nutrition. And the real significance of this is that, you know, this is now based on absolutely rock-solid scientific evidence. And that now has been sufficiently convincing and accepted that it has translated into the scaling up nutrition movement, which I think is one of the most potentially significant breakthroughs for the foreseeable future. A movement that can, if it is the promise is delivered on, it can really make a difference in terms of the number of children who are, reduction in the percentage of children that are stunted. So I think we've got at the moment a remarkable combination and convergence of, if you like, I would say political priorities. We've got the G8, I see out on the screen there, the decisions made in the next 24 hours will be critical for current and future food security by Dan Flixman. I mean, that actually sums it up. This meeting today, or tomorrow and the next day, is actually unprecedented in terms of senior political figures devoting time to food and nutrition security. We actually have changed the language in the last number of years. But that ultimately has to be then translated into real practical action at the national level. Yesterday we shared a platform together with the President of Tanzania, and he outlined the quite systematic approach that Tanzania is putting in place to implement the Sun movement. There are 27 African countries who are committed, 27 countries who are committed to this. I would caution we're still at a very early stage in all of this. And we need to learn from each other. But the promise that there is that we're going on the right path, that there is high-level political commitment, that there are national frameworks to implement the principles of the Sun, which has to involve civil society. I think it means that we're meeting at a moment of great promise for the world and for the children of the world.
Great. Talking about stakeholders, especially Ms. Cousin, you talked about engaging stakeholders. How do we keep stakeholders accountable? Given that we want to take action on this and still looking at it from the point of view of 1,000 days windows, how do we keep stakeholders accountable, especially to do with nutrition?
We keep stakeholders accountable by ensuring that we have agreed indicators and metrics for success, that we monitor against those metrics, and that we perform and invest to drive to the achievement of those metrics. The dollars should follow accountability and success. If that is the case, stakeholders will respond appropriately. And that is in business, there's a saying that says, what doesn't get measured doesn't count. And so we need that same level of discipline in this work to ensure that it is not just the outputs, but the outcomes that we're measuring toward, that we're working towards, and that we're publishing, and that we're measuring, and that we're ultimately where the investment dollars are made.
Yes.
If I can just answer as well, because I think it is important. Accountability, as I pointed out. In fact, there's a G8 accountability report that will be coming out, and that now means that the G8 countries have committed to accountability, regular reporting on all the commitments being made, and also measuring the indicators that have been agreed to. I would say that this follows the L'Aquila commitments, which was about food security, the maternal child health from Canada's G8. And you can't be talking about nutrition, you can't be talking about the Sun movement the first 1,000 days without integrating it into your maternal child health programming. And so I think we have to commend the G8 countries for that leadership, being very diligent and constantly improving the reporting systems, the definition of indicators, the criteria by which will be measured. So I just point you to that report that's going to be coming out this weekend.
Great. Thinking about stakeholders, sometimes we are lost in terms of thinking that stakeholders are just, established world leaders, and sometimes the responsibility of the government or the responsibility of the key businesses in an economy. And it is important that Minister Oda mentioned something about how do we engage, local communities at maybe, let's say, district levels. And I want to explore this further, and maybe starting with you because you brought it on the table. How do we make nutrition, more visible at grassroots levels, let's say district levels, given the fact that we are exploring how we can influence behavior on healthy agriculture, and I think it starts from the substratum of our society. So how can we make it more visible, given that it's a very new topic?
Well, I think Ertharin referred to the most vulnerable, and I always note that the most vulnerable in most cases historically have been the most remote, rural, smallholder farmers, these people who, when disaster hits, drought, famine, etc., their impact there is really important. And so when we engage in local community level, that we have to engage with the leadership in that community to ensure, again, we have a comprehensive, integrated approach at that level. Also, we have to ensure that when we're providing support for agriculture, we're encouraging what products and crops they're growing to be the most nutritious. We discussed yellow potatoes, yams yesterday. We've got chickpeas, etc. The next step, I think, because we've had success in microfinancing, we can engage local communities into the value-added process. We have chickpeas now being used to create the nutritious additional food. In Afghanistan, we have the nutritious biscuits, the enriched biscuits in Afghanistan by a small group. We have iodization of salt being done by cooperatives in small groups. And this is where we also increase the small, medium size, create businesses, create entry into marketplaces. And I think one of the things, it's education. We have to incorporate nutrition in the education programs, in the curriculum, in teacher training as well. So I think, again, we have to look at it in a very comprehensive, integrated approach, and we can do that starting with each community, then regionally, as Ertharin said, and at the same time working with national governments to make sure we're not only doing it bottom up, but also top down.
Can I just add one word? When I was young, there was a song that said, "Tell Mama." And the reality is, if we want to make change, tell Mama. Work with the women in the communities to ensure that we are driving the messages of education that are necessary to change the behavior, particularly the consumption behavior of families in the community. If we tell Mama, we know that if we educate women, provide them with access to land, provide them with the access to seeds, to tools, that we will increase production in the communities, that children will be educated, that there will be additional opportunities. So reaching out and including women in the outreach program is essential to driving the change at the community level.
It is very important and very interesting that you've mentioned behavior in terms of reaching out to women and I would say even girls who are sometimes neglected in all this agenda. What do you think is how can we deal with the threat of fashion, food fashion? You just find it like for instance, I study in the US and I see it's just cool to take some kind of food given the fad of the moment, How do we deal with this? Because I think it really threatens healthy agricultural practices because it is just cool to have some kind of food within the table, but how can we deal with that, Mr. Arnold?
I mean, that's a very genuine problem, I think, and I think all you can do is really keep stressing the basic principles of good nutrition. You talked about community engagement earlier on, and I mean, Concern has a very interesting example in Zambia. We call it the RAIN project, realigning agriculture to improve nutrition. We're doing it in close association with IFPRI. And the basic principles of that are growing a different crop mix to bring more nutritious food into it, making sure that there's an integration of the health and agriculture and nutrition efforts, and that the local ministries are involved in that integration, and beginning to engage with, at community level, with particularly with women's groups. And here you get into issues of behavior change, of education, of looking at things as basic as weaning practices. So I think it's by stressing the basics and, you know, trying to deliver on them and trying to get the local authorities, as Beverley said, it can't be just bottom up, it has to be top down, within a sensible national framework to have that sort of joined up efforts.
Yeah, due to time pressure, I think we are running out of time. But I want us just to crown it all, but with a very particular focus. You know, well, I want just to ask you, like, you know, there are very many people watching this online, and as well as we have got the key drivers in this particular audience. What do you think are the best opportunities, or the biggest opportunities that you see that the private sector as well as the government can get involved, and what action should the people who are watching us today take, as we all crown with one statement or so? What would you think about the best or the biggest opportunity that you think exist in terms of taking this forward? I'll start with you.
Well, I think I will just build on what Tom said. This is a critical moment. I think this gathering here has brought leaders, have brought those who are thinking very seriously about this issue to have totally, and I can feel it, in the incorporation of nutrition and food security. We have been dealing with food security for so long. I think, you know, to make sure that in all programs, as I've said, your economic growth programs, your education programs, your health programs, this has to be integrated. And, you know, in all of those, let me say two things: women, 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 women. The payoff in that is something that we should not, as smart people, ignore. We're losing such a great opportunity. So this is a critical moment. I think that bringing the people we've brought together with civil society, private sector, leaders of the G8, leaders of our African partnership here as well, our NGO, if we come together and we're smart about it, we can really make a difference.
Just make it short. Just make it short because.
I agree completely with Beverley. But let me also add very quickly that this is not just a moment, this is a beginning. And we must sustain the commitment that everyone brought in this room today to doing things differently, to ensure that we are engaged for the long term. Because if we want to make the change to ensure that the 170 million children who are malnourished reach and achieve their potential in life, we must be in this for the long term.
Thanks so much.
Well, the last word, I think I think the significance of these days are that we are actually talking about senior political people saying, stressing the importance of nutrition. We're also, and this is going to be a big breakthrough, and we'll hear more about it later, the role of the private sector has a huge role to play in helping us solve this problem.
Thanks so much, ladies and gentlemen, for participating in this particular panel, and wish you well the rest of the day.
Thank you.